Every single year, they destroy something their great-grandparents would have protected with their lives. Here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody in the modern world wants to talk about. For most of human history, there were no pharmacies, there were no antibiotics, there were no prescription pads or urgent care clinics. People survived infections, wounds, inflammation, and illness using the plants that grew naturally around them. And a shocking number of those plants are still growing in backyards, along fence lines, through sidewalk cracks, and across neglected fields all over the world right now. Modern medicine is extraordinary. It saves lives every single day. But somewhere between the invention of the antibiotic pill and the rise of the billion-dollar pharmaceutical industry, humanity lost something deeply important. We lost the knowledge of the land. We lost the understanding of what grows naturally around us and why it grows there. We stopped asking questions about the plants pushing up through our garden beds and started treating all of them as enemies. The result? People spend enormous amounts of money on supplements, immune boosters, and over-the-counter treatments while literally standing on top of plants containing the same antibacterial, antimicrobial, and anti-inflammatory compounds that made them legendary for centuries of traditional medicine. Plant number 3 on this list was once called the poor man's pharmacy because it was so widely available and so widely trusted. Plant number 6 is considered by many herbalists to be one of the most nutrient-dense plants on the entire planet. Yet most homeowners rip it out every spring with thick gloves because it stings them on contact. And plant number 8 carries a name that tells you everything you need to know about what traditional healers believed it could do. The most remarkable part about all 8 of these plants? They are free. They are already trying to grow around you right now. Nature is literally trying to hand you something, and most people are too busy reaching for the weed killer to notice. Before we get into it, drop a comment below and tell me this. What is the one weed that keeps coming back in your yard no matter how many times you pull it? I want to know. And if this kind of knowledge speaks to you, if you love forgotten natural remedies, herbal medicine, survival gardening, and the wisdom older generations carried, then make sure you subscribe to Daily Plant Life, because this channel exists to keep that knowledge alive. All right, let's get into all 8 of them. Plant number 1, purslane. Most people who find this plant in their garden immediately assume it is a pest. It spreads flat across the soil, has thick rubbery leaves, and seems to appear out of nowhere after the first summer rain. Gardeners usually pull it out by the handful and toss it without a second thought. But here is what makes purslane remarkable. It contains one of the highest concentrations of omega-3 fatty acids ever found in a land plant. And beyond that, it carries powerful antibacterial compounds that traditional cultures across the Middle East, Asia, and the Mediterranean used for centuries to treat skin infections, stomach ailments, and inflammatory conditions. In ancient Egyptian medicine, purslane was used as a cooling remedy applied directly to inflamed skin and minor wounds. In traditional Chinese medicine, it was known as a potent herb for clearing heat and resolving toxins in the body, which is the classical description for fighting internal infection. Healers brewed it into teas for intestinal infections and applied its fresh juice to burns, insect stings, and skin irritations. Modern research has confirmed that purslane contains noradrenaline, dopamine, malic acid, and citric acid, alongside its impressive array of antibacterial compounds, giving science a reason to take seriously what traditional healers already knew. It has demonstrated activity against common harmful bacteria in laboratory studies, offering validation for its long history in wound care and digestive support. The irony is that purslane actually tastes good. It has a mild, slightly tangy flavor that works well in salads, stir-fries, and soups. Entire cultures still eat it today, as a regular part of the diet. Meanwhile, in suburban neighborhoods across America and Europe, people are pulling it out of their raised beds and composting it without ever knowing what they had. Bonus tip: purslane is most potent when harvested young and eaten fresh or lightly cooked, since heat does reduce some of its active compounds. Plant number 2, lamb's quarters. This plant goes by many names depending on where you are in the world. Some people call it wild spinach, some people call it pigweed, others call it goosefoot, because of the distinctive shape of its leaves. No matter what name it carries, most people who find it in their garden treat it as unwanted competition for their vegetables and pull it without a second look. That is a significant mistake. Lamb's quarters has been used as both food and medicine by indigenous and traditional cultures on virtually every inhabited continent for thousands of years. Native American tribes across North America harvested it regularly for its seeds, which were ground into nutritious flour, and its leaves, which were used in both cooking and in poultices applied to infected or inflamed skin. The plant contains significant amounts of vitamins A, C, and K, along with calcium, potassium, and iron in concentrations that rival many cultivated vegetables. But its medicinal reputation was built on something else. Lamb's quarters has demonstrated antibacterial activity against several harmful bacterial strains, and traditional healers used it specifically for skin infections, toothaches, and as a wash for wounds that were not healing cleanly. The seeds were historically valuable enough that some archaeological sites in North America show evidence of large-scale lamb's quarters seed harvesting going back thousands of years. People were not just tolerating this plant, they were cultivating relationships with it, encouraging it to grow, saving its seeds, and passing knowledge about it down through generations. Today, that knowledge is nearly extinct in most mainstream Western culture. The plant keeps growing because it wants to grow around humans, and humans keep destroying it because they no longer know what it is. Bonus tip: young leaves before the plant flowers are the tenderest and most nutritious. The white powdery coating on the leaves is natural and harmless. Plant number 3, cleavers. If you have ever walked through a field or brushed against a hedgerow and come back covered in tiny sticky green seeds clinging to your jacket and your socks, you have met cleavers. This plant is also called goosegrass, sticky willy, and catchweed, and it earns every one of those names through its aggressive habit of latching onto anything that moves past it. For most people, cleavers is nothing more than an annoying hitchhiker that needs to be controlled before it takes over the garden edges. But in traditional European herbal medicine, cleavers was so highly regarded that it was one of the first plants harvested in spring specifically for medicinal use. Herbalists called it one of the great cleansers of the blood and lymphatic system. The lymphatic system is essentially the body's internal drainage network, responsible for filtering waste, fighting infection, and transporting immune cells where they are needed. When it becomes sluggish or overwhelmed, infections linger, skin breaks out, and the body struggles to recover efficiently. Traditional healers used cleavers specifically to stimulate and support lymphatic flow during infections and illnesses. Modern herbalists still use it for the same purpose, particularly for swollen lymph nodes, skin conditions, and urinary tract infections, where it acts as a gentle but effective cleansing agent. Its active compounds include tannins, flavonoids, and iridoids that give it mild antibacterial properties and support the body's own immune response rather than acting as a direct antibiotic substitute. The fresh juice of cleavers was traditionally squeezed from the plant and consumed during spring as a powerful seasonal cleanse. And it grew everywhere, freely, needing nothing from anyone, just waiting to be understood. Bonus tip: cleavers is most potent in spring before it flowers. The fresh plant is traditionally used rather than dried, as drying significantly reduces its active compounds. Plant number 4, sheep sorrel. Sheep sorrel is a small, low-growing plant with arrow-shaped leaves and reddish stems that pops up in acidic, nutrient-poor soil that most cultivated plants would refuse to grow in. It spreads through a combination of seeds and underground rhizomes, which makes it extremely persistent once established. Most gardeners know it as that sour little weed that keeps coming back in the same patches year after year, no matter what they do. The sour taste is not accidental. It comes from oxalic acid and a family of plant compounds called anthraquinones, and those compounds are exactly what made sheep sorrel valuable in traditional medicine for centuries. Sheep sorrel is one of 4 herbs included in the legendary Essiac formula, a blend of plants used by indigenous healers in Canada and later brought to wider attention in the early 20th century for its supportive properties during serious illness. It was not chosen arbitrarily. Traditional ojibwa, a blend of plants used by indigenous healers in Canada and later brought to wider attention in the early 20th century for its supportive properties during serious illness. It was not chosen arbitrarily. Traditional Ojibwe healers had used sheep sorrel as part of their medicine practices for generations before any Western herbalist encountered it. The plant's antibacterial and antifungal properties have been studied in modern research, with its anthraquinone compounds showing activity against specific strains of bacteria and fungi. Traditional uses included applying the fresh leaves as a poultice for skin infections, ringworm, and irritated or inflamed skin, as well as brewing the leaves into a tea for digestive complaints and fever. The irony is that sheep sorrel tends to grow most aggressively in lawns and gardens that have been overworked, repeatedly treated with chemicals, and stripped of nutrients. It is a signal plant. Its presence tells you something about your soil, and instead of reading that signal, most people respond by trying to destroy the messenger. Bonus tip: sheep sorrel should be consumed in moderation due to its oxalic acid content, particularly by individuals prone to kidney stones. Traditional use involved small therapeutic amounts rather than large quantities. Plant number 5, mallow. Common mallow is one of those plants that shows up everywhere. Driveways, garden beds, neglected corners of the yard, cracks in pavement, roadsides. It has rounded, scalloped leaves and small pink to purple flowers that bloom quietly and persistently throughout the growing season. Most people pull it immediately when they find it because it spreads quickly and looks weedy. But mallow has one of the longest documented medicinal histories of any plant on this list. Ancient Greek physicians used it. Roman writers documented it. Medieval European herbalists relied on it heavily. In traditional Arabic and Persian medicine, mallow was so widely used that it appeared in medical texts dating back more than 1,000 years as a remedy for inflammation, infection, and pain. The entire plant, leaves, stems, flowers, and roots, contains a high concentration of mucilage, a thick gel-like substance that coats and soothes irritated mucous membranes throughout the body. This is why mallow was historically used for sore throats, respiratory infections, urinary tract inflammation, and digestive complaints. The mucilage creates a protective barrier over inflamed tissues, while the plant's antibacterial compounds work to address the underlying infection. Traditional healers poultice the crushed leaves directly onto skin infections, boils, and abscesses, using both the soothing mucilage and the antibacterial compounds simultaneously. In some traditional communities, mallow was so trusted for drawing out infections that it was considered a first-line treatment before anything else was tried. It grows freely. It requires no cultivation. It comes back year after year, and the people pulling it out of their driveways are buying throat lozenges at the pharmacy that contain synthetic versions of the exact same mucilage compounds. Bonus tip: the young leaves of mallow are edible and were historically eaten in salads and soups throughout the Mediterranean and Middle East, where they are still a regular part of traditional cooking today. Plant number 6, stinging nettle. Of all the plants on this list, stinging nettle is probably the one most people have a personal and painful memory of. Those tiny hollow hairs on the leaves and stems inject a cocktail of formic acid, histamine, and acetylcholine on contact, leaving a burning, itching rash that can last for hours. It is not a subtle plant. It announces itself immediately. And most homeowners respond by grabbing the thickest gloves they own and clearing every last inch of it from their property with fierce determination. That determination is understandable, but it is also, from a medicinal standpoint, deeply unfortunate. Stinging nettle is one of the most nutrient-dense plants that grows wild in temperate climates anywhere on Earth. Once dried or cooked, the sting is completely neutralized, leaving behind a dark, mineral-rich green that contains bioavailable iron, calcium, magnesium, potassium, and vitamins A, C, and K in concentrations that outperform many common vegetables. But nettle's medicinal reputation goes far beyond its nutritional profile. The plant contains specific lectins and phenolic compounds that directly attack bacteria. research has shown nettle extract inhibiting the growth of both respiratory and urinary pathogens, making it effective against the types of bacterial infections that send people to urgent care looking for antibiotics. Traditional European healers used nettle specifically for chronic infections that seem to linger and resist improvement. They used it for urinary tract infections, for respiratory congestion, for seasonal allergies caused by immune dysregulation, and for joint pain and inflammation rooted in systemic infection. They also used it for anemia and fatigue, knowing instinctively that its iron and vitamin C content would support the body's recovery. For generations, nettle tea was a spring ritual in many European and North American communities. People gathered it deliberately, wearing gloves not because they feared it, but because they respected it. They knew the sting meant the plant was alive and potent. Somewhere along the way, that respect disappeared and only the fear remained. Bonus tip: nettles are best harvested before flowering in early spring, when the leaves are youngest and most tender. Always wear gloves when handling fresh plant material. Plant number 7, ground elder. Ground elder is the plant that drives serious gardeners completely mad. It spreads through a relentless underground network of white rhizomes that can regenerate from the smallest fragment left in the soil. Pull it, dig it, smother it, and it comes back. It spreads under paths, through fence lines, and into neighboring beds with total disregard for any boundary you try to create. Many gardeners describe managing it as a full-time occupation, and yet the people who first brought ground elder to much of northern Europe did so entirely on purpose. Roman soldiers are historically credited with spreading ground elder across the lands they conquered, specifically because it was one of their primary medicinal and food plants. They cultivated it deliberately near their camps and settlements. Medieval monks maintained ground elder patches in their physic gardens alongside other important medicinal herbs. They called it Herb Gerard and used it specifically for gout, arthritis, and inflammatory joint conditions. Ground elder contains flavonoids, including quercetin and kaempferol, that are well studied for their anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties. Traditional healers applied it as a poultice directly to swollen, painful joints. They brewed it into teas for inflammatory conditions affecting the digestive system and urinary tract. And they ate the young leaves regularly, as a vegetable, understanding that food and medicine were not separate categories. The plant that homeowners battle every spring with digging forks and frustrated curses was once considered so valuable that people carried it deliberately across continents to make sure it would grow near them wherever they went. That complete reversal in how a plant is perceived, from prized medicine to despised pest, is one of the most striking examples of how much traditional plant knowledge has been lost in just a few generations. Bonus tip: young ground elder leaves picked before the plant flowers in late spring have the mildest flavor and are traditionally used in salads and lightly cooked dishes. Plant number 8, self-heal. Self-heal is the quietest plant on this list. It grows low to the ground with small square stems and neat spikes of purple flowers that often go completely unnoticed in a lawn. It does not sting. It does not spread aggressively. It does not cling to your clothing or smell strongly. It simply grows, modestly and persistently, in the margins of lawns, at the edges of paths, and in the short grass of fields and meadows. And it carries the most direct name in the entire herbal tradition: self-heal. The people who gave it that name were not being poetic. They were making a practical statement based on direct observation. They watched this plant work. They used it on wounds that were not closing. They applied it to throat infections that were lingering. They made it into washes for mouth sores and skin ulcers. And they saw results consistent enough to name the plant after the outcome. Botanically known as Prunella vulgaris, self-heal contains a remarkable concentration of rosmarinic acid, one of the most extensively studied plant compounds for its antibacterial, antiviral, and antioxidant properties. Rosmarinic acid has been shown to prevent harmful bacteria from replicating and from binding to healthy tissue, effectively containing infections at a cellular level before they can spread and cause serious damage. What makes self-heal particularly notable is that modern research has examined its effectiveness against drug-resistant bacterial strains, the very problem that has made conventional antibiotic therapy increasingly complicated. The results have been significant enough that self-heal is no longer studied only by herbalists. It is attracting serious scientific attention. Traditional herbalists used it both internally and externally. As a tea or infusion, it was used for throat infections, mouth ulcers, internal inflammation, and immune support during illness. As an external wash or poultice, it was applied to wounds, cuts, skin infections, and slow-healing sores, where it accelerated tissue repair and kept secondary infections at bay. And all of this from a plant so small and so unassuming that most people mow straight over it every single week without ever noticing it is there. That is perhaps the most important thing this list teaches. The most powerful remedies are often the most overlooked. The plants that grow most freely, that ask for no care and no cultivation, that return year after year without any help from us, are frequently the ones that carry the deepest relationship with human health. For most of human history, people maintained a living partnership with the plants around them. They did not see a weed. They saw a resource. They saw medicine. They saw food. They saw something that was offering itself to them, and they had the knowledge to accept that offer and use it wisely. Modern life broke that partnership. Herbicides replaced observation. Lawn aesthetics replaced plant literacy. The pharmacy replaced the backyard. And the result is that an enormous amount of practical, time-tested knowledge about the plants growing freely all around us has been lost in the span of just 2 or 3 generations. None of this means you should stop seeing a doctor when you are seriously ill. Modern medicine is not the enemy, but there is room in a thoughtful life for both. There is room to understand what grows naturally around you and why it grows there. There is room to look more closely before you reach for the weed killer. The next time you walk through your backyard, or along a path, or through a neglected field, look down. Look at what is growing. Ask yourself whether you know what it is. Because chances are, if it grows freely and persistently, without any help from humans, there is a reason it has been growing alongside us for thousands of years. Nature does not waste anything. The plants that follow us wherever we go and return, no matter how many times we try to remove them, are telling us something. The question is whether we are willing to slow down long enough to listen. If this kind of knowledge matters to you, if you want to understand the plants growing freely around you rather than destroying them out of habit, then hit the like button and subscribe to Daily Plant Life. Every video on this channel is dedicated to keeping this knowledge alive before it disappears entirely. Leave a comment below and tell me which one of these 8 plants is currently growing in your backyard. And more importantly, will you look at it differently the next time you see it? Thank you so much for watching.